powerful black magic. Riled up by superstition, an angry mob of Cyril's supporters searched the streets for Hypatia. They found her on her way to work and pulled her off a chariot, taking her to a newly converted church and stripped her naked. Now in the movie, one of the Christians, Davis, who used to be her slave, and because of his love for his former mistress, he kills her by smothering her. Unfortunately, Davis is a fictional character, and her real death was not as peaceful. The Parabolani grabbed bits of broken roof tiles and pottery and flayed her alive. After suffering a very painful death, they cut off her limbs and burnt them. With Hypatia out of the way, Orestes resigned shortly afterwards, allowing Cyril to gain total authority over Alexandria. Later, he was declared a saint. If science ever had a martyr, it was Hypatia. At the risk of her own life, she refused to be swayed by these mindless fanatics and carried on doing what she loved, and that was teaching, in pursuing science, mathematics, and philosophy as the world around her tore itself apart. She remained true to her beliefs, right up until the very end.
Years ago, you taught us something. If two are equal to a third, they are all equal to each other. Do you remember?
Yes.
The three of us, we are all good people, and you are as Christian as we are.
Dionysius, you don't question what you believe. You cannot. I must.
Agora is one of those movies that flew completely under my radar, and I wouldn't be surprised if many of you haven't even heard of it until now. This is a film I immensely enjoyed, and it covers a period of history that not many people know about. And I believe that this is a film that needs to be watched. Now, normally when I do these reviews, I point out inaccuracies and I inform you how close the film got to the source material. But ironically, it's going to be difficult since very little information has survived today. And it's because of stupid shit like this. Now, there are some things we do know, like for example that Hypatia was probably in her 50s or 60s around the time of her death, meaning that the lovely Rachel Weisz is too young to play Hypatia in the second half of the film, but it's not really a big deal to me. Another thing about Hypatia was that she was better known for her work in mathematics and geometry, but the film is justified in showing her passion for astronomy, as there are records of her working on instruments like the astrolabe, which was a device that located the position of the stars and planets and telling you what time it was and etc. As to what she exactly worked on remains a mystery, unfortunately, but it does allow the film to be creative here. Probably the biggest plot point in the entire film for Hypatia is when she's trying to disprove the accepted Ptolemaic system, which stated that the Earth was the center of the universe and everything revolved around it.
Earth is the center of the cosmos. And revolving around it, the Sun and the five wanderers, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, obstinately disobeying the law of the circle. Nevertheless, Ptolemy shows us that they do obey it. The fact that we see them move in a loop is due to the joint effect of two circles. One that travels around the Earth, and another lesser circle, proper to each wanderer.
This is of course completely wrong, and Hypatia is the one who asks why it's so needlessly complicated and surely there is a simple answer. Then she considers the theory Aristarchus had of the Earth revolving around the Sun along with the other planets, which is known as the heliocentric system. Over the course of the film she tries to prove this theory, but keeps on coming up short, since the consensus at the time was that the planets only orbit in a circle. And then towards the end of the film, Hypatia finally figures out the answer.
An ellipse! With the sun at one of its foci. Because what is a circle? Except a very special ellipse, whose foci have drawn so close together that they appear to be one. But perhaps I'm completely raving. Vespasius, I mean, really, why should this be so? Maybe I'm just Maybe
This is the tragic part of the film because we see Hypatia correctly figure out the answer, only to die shortly afterwards, taking this theory to her grave. Now, there is no evidence at all that Hypatia ever worked on the heliocentric system, but there is no way to prove or disprove this since hardly any of her work has survived. So, the movie is trying to make a point here and is asking, what if she had? What if she figured out the answer 1200 years before Johannes Kepler did? Questions such as these are seen to be quite controversial, especially because of the answers depicted in the movie. When Agora came out, let's just say it wasn't received very well by Christians.
The presentation of it as a battle between science and sweet reason on the one hand, and this sort of hysterical, primitive, superstitious Christianity on the other hand is just for the birds.
Personally, I feel criticisms such as these are unwarranted. I didn't walk away from this film thinking that it was about science versus Christianity. Throughout the film we see pagans, Jews, and Christians committing horrific acts. In my opinion, I think this film is discussing the dangers of fundamentalism and how religion can and does inspire it. Fanatical destruction that we see with the library can also be seen today, like how ISIS is destroying temples and archaeological sites simply because of their twisted interpretation of Islam. But you know what? I'm going to go even further with this and just tell it like it is. Christians back then were not like Christians today. There was a general hostility towards classical learning, and anything acquainted with paganism or the Old World Order had no place with the church's teachings. And so classical Greek and Roman literature would be rejected by choice. Don't take my word for it though, here's a quote from Roman period Christian apologist called Tertullian. What indeed has Athens to do with Jerusalem? What concord is there between the academy and the church? What between heretics and Christians? Our instruction comes from the porch of Solomon, who had himself taught that the Lord should be sought in simplicity of heart. Away with all attempts to produce a model Christianity of Stoic, Platonic, and dialectic composition. We want no curious disputation after possessing Christ Jesus. No inquisition after enjoying the gospel. With our faith, we desire no further belief. So if the Christians depicted in the movie are ignorant, it's because their historical counterparts chose to be. They made an actual effort to eradicate pagan thought and practice in order to replace it with a new belief system. And after the fall of the Roman Empire, the church would be the sole institution in the Western world. For 800 years, their teachings were God's teachings, and anything else contradicting it was heresy. This period in time would be called the Dark Ages. And what were the consequences of such a radical step backwards in human development? Well, with so much lost, it's impossible to say. Many historians speculate that our civilization would be far more advanced than it is today. A single great example of this would be the work of a Greek inventor who lived in Alexandria called Heron. What you're seeing is one of his inventions, the world's first steam turbine engine. This device had harnessed the power of steam nearly 2,000 years before James Watt changed the world with his. Although Heron and his successors didn't see its full potential at the time, what if some other inventor centuries later had? What if science wasn't seen as heresy and was encouraged like in the glory days of Alexandria? What kind of a world would we live in today? Well, that about wraps it up. My name is Nick Hodges, and thanks for watching History Buffs. And remember, if you like the show, help the channel grow. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know in the comment section what you thought about Agora. And of course, what historical movie should I review next? In the meantime, check out the History Buffs Twitter and Facebook pages for new updates. Until then, I'll see you next time.